G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here to talk to you this time about how local governments can construct successful shared service collaborations. So a lot of local governments in Australia share services, so that's when two or more local governments get together to produce a particular service. And sometimes it's done with a lot of care. Usually it's done with the intent of saving money, but as my recent research shows, often that intent's not realised at all. Shared services are important because particular local government functions have specific production characteristics. Now, in a previous video I talked all about economies of scale, and this is a graph taken from a recent publication of mine. Here's for local government functions A, B, C, and D. You can see here that function A has a U-shaped curve. It's got economies of scale, and the optimal scale here is at 20,000 taxpayers. You can see that function B also has it, but the optimal scale now is at 5,000 taxpayers. Function C is just a straight line. What that means is as you increase production, as you increase output, you're not going to save any money at all. And that's pretty typical of the far majority of local governments. Indeed, I did a paper a few years back which showed that only 4 out of the 11 functional specific categories were responsive to economies of scale. Most of them are going to be like function C. And function D is another service whereby the optimal scale is at 50,000. Now, amalgamation, one of the many reasons why it doesn't work, the principal reason being, of course, that we get commercial consultants involved and they don't know what they're doing. But one of the other reasons why local government amalgamations don't work is that when you amalgamate 2 or more councils together, you get one fixed scale of output. And the chances of it being the optimal scale for every single function is almost nil. Shared services allows you to take a different tack. What it allows you to do is to pick different partners to provide different services with. So for function D, you might pick 2 or 3 other councils to help you out to provide those services so you can get near the optimal scale. Function B, you might already be at the optimal scale, so you might not get involved in shared services. And function C, for A for instance, is midway, and you might just get one other partner for shared services. So the beauty of shared services is you mix and match your partners to get to the optimal scale so that you can provide the services at the minimum efficient point or the minimum efficient cost. Now, there's 2 other important things you need to know about shared services when selecting partners. One is you need a certain degree of homogeneity. Homogeneity, just a big word for lots of similar things, okay? So you need your communities to have homogeneous tastes for whatever the service is that you're producing. There's no good 2 local governments getting together to produce one service if their communities have different tastes for different standards of services. And you need to have the same standard of service. Second of all, you need to have homogeneous production processes. There's no good 2 local governments getting together to provide shared services if you have completely different processes, completely different mixtures of capital and labour used to produce those services, because you'll just end up with a conflation of both processes. So we do need homogeneity. But we also need a certain degree of heterogeneity, differences. And particularly what we're looking for is complementarity in what economists call comparative advantage. Now, in economics, the idea of comparative advantage is that most people, most nations, most local governments have an advantage in producing a particular thing. They've just got the right skill set, the right mix of capital and labour, the right processes, whatever. And what you're trying to do when selecting a successful shared service partner is to find a partner who has all of the things you don't have. So if you're from a local government that's got really good plant and equipment, but you're struggling to find experienced staff to run the program, or you don't have enough capital to inject into the program, well then you'd be looking to partner with a council that's got heaps of super experienced professionals in the area that you need them in, but may not have the capital equipment that you've got. If we get the complementarities together, if we select our partners carefully, we can actually build off each other's advantages and produce something that's so much better than either one of the local governments could have done by themselves. So the upshot of it all was in a paper I published a year ago, 2 years ago now, looking at the jurisdiction level outcomes from shared services arrangements. This time I picked the state of South Australia because they had really good data to work with. And what we found, much to a lot of people's surprise, is that shared services were actually associated with an 8% increase to cost. Let's put that another way. These local governments in South Australia got together to produce shared services, mainly with the intent of saving money and becoming more efficient. But what's actually transpired is that local governments with shared services are spending an extra 8% on producing those services, which is completely the opposite of what their intention is, and it's a pretty disastrous outcome. Now, this doesn't mean that they haven't received some benefits. Maybe they've got better service quality than what they had previously, but on a purely pecuniary level, it's been a failure. And in that paper, I go through the reasons why. And one of the big problems is that up until that point in time, the literature ignored this thing called exogenous costs. Costs that stay with the residual council after the shared services have been exported to a new entity. So for instance, if two local governments got together to do shared services on rubbish collection, okay, that's great. You put it in this new entity and transfer the staff and equipment over so that the entity can run this service on behalf of both local governments. What happens if my bin doesn't get picked up one morning or gets knocked over by the truck? What do? I'll ring my local government. So the local government has, sent off this service to the shared service entity, but they're still stuck with residual things like dealing with customer complaints and customer inquiries and dealing with some administration as well. And I think a lot of the time people forget about those exogenous costs, but also, as I've just outlined in this video, they forget to pick partners who have homogeneous tastes for the goods, who have homogeneous processes, but who have complementary advantages. So these sorts of ideas are an example of how I go through things in my new book called Saving Local Government. Production's been delayed. It's actually not going to come out until January next year now, so good item for your Christmas stocking. But what the book's designed for is councillors, mayors, deputy mayors, local government executives, GMs, heads of departments, chief financial officers. It goes through and explains the theory of local government in terms of economics, in terms of natural law, accounting theory, but then it shows you how to apply it. In fact, at the end of each chapter, I give you a little recipe for how to implement these things in your local government area. So if you're interested in improving your local government, if you know someone else that's interested in improving your local government, an excellent Christmas present or an early New Year's present. Shared services, they are important, but you've got to be incredibly careful. If you don't take care in selection of your partners, if you don't take care about which services you share, it can end up costing you more money, which is the total opposite of what you're trying to achieve. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, put the thumbs up for me, and please disseminate it. Send it to other people in local governments that you know. The whole idea of this channel is to give local government people the information they need to help them make local government serve their citizens better than they already do. I can't do that without your help unless you guys are out there sending it to other councillors, sending it to other general managers. The information is not going to get into the hands of the people that need it most. So please do think about forwarding a link to someone else. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.